Recording will start.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning.
We're excited that you're here. Thanks very much for coming, letting people jump on. But welcome to Championing Equity, the release of the statewide AB 540 FAQ. We're so excited that you're here. We have almost 1,000 individuals who registered today from all across the state. So thank you so much for jumping on. We are the ones that we've been waiting for, and we are the change. We're being the change that we want to see in the world. And we know from your participation here that you support equity and access for all students, regardless of immigration status. We're so excited that you're here. Today, in our Championing Equity statewide AB 540 FAQ webinar release, we're going to be giving you an overview of this powerful and exciting, groundbreaking statewide AB 540 FAQ, and you'll hear about its development from across the state, from practitioners and leaders. You'll be able to hear directly from system leaders about their buy-in for this, as well as the approval of their legal counsel, and learn how you will be able to more effectively guide current and prospective students in navigating these AB 540 requirements. But before we go into all of the depth of all of the different pieces we're going to be talking about, we do want to start with honoring all of your work from the CCCs, your work from the CSUs, from the UCs, from high schools, from community-based organizations, from adult schools, from non-credit programs. These are all of the pathways from graduate school as well. These are the pathways that we have helped to develop along with the student leaders who made AB 540 possible in the beginning. So we want to make sure that you hear our gratitude and our appreciation for all that you have done and for all that you're going to do in terms of moving forward this statewide AB 540 FAQ. In terms of our agenda for today, we're doing the welcome and introductions. You're going to hear a little bit about some of the roadblocks that were there in terms of accessing AB 540, the creation and history of the AB 540 Intersegmental Work Group, the systemic buy-in and legal approval of the FAQ, and then you'll actually get to go deep into the FAQ and get some of the details about that. I'm so excited to share that with you. And we're really excited to be able to hear from practitioners from across the state, their perspective about the benefits of the AB 540 FAQ and some next steps before we close at 11 o'clock. You're hearing from me. My name is Nancy Jeditis, and I'm the Director of Higher Education at Immigrants Rising. I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Will Perez, and my colleague, Madeline Villanueva. She's behind the scenes today. We were all co-chairs of the Intersegmental Work Group. And you'll also hear from system leaders, Shawn Brick and Linda Vazquez. Shawn Brick from the UC Office of the President and Linda Vazquez from the CC Office of the Chancellor. And we're really excited that you'll be hearing from some statewide practitioners, all of us who are members of the Intersegmental Work Group. Rod Santos from Contra Costa College, Carmen Macias from Mount San Antonio College, and Rose Carmona-Arbulú from San Francisco State University. So welcome. We're so excited that you're here. And I'm going to turn it over now to my co-host, Dr. William Perez.
Okay, so thank you, everyone. And again, I just want to commend your ongoing commitment to supporting our students, regardless of their immigration status, and students from immigrant communities across the state. And really, this is, a momentous occasion for so many reasons that, I don't have enough time to go on. But, at the 20-year anniversary of AB 540, we did a lot of reflection. And as you see on this graph here, what began as a national model that other states subsequently followed, we began to expand that. And over the years, as you see here, we expanded in 2014 AB 2000, in 2017 SB 68, and then as we'll see on this next graphic, most recently SB 1141. And again, all of this was always keeping students front and center, expanding access, but that created unexpected challenges that this FAQ is intended to address. So in the next slide, we'll talk to you about, in the early days of AB 540. And I remember this, back in the day when all of us were trying to get this information to practitioners, to students, to families, to community organizations, to activists, to policymakers. And so a slew of resources, was created, by a variety of entities that provided some information, most of the information, not always all of the information that was relevant, and sometimes conflicting information, right? Because, the landscape was moving and, these resources weren't always being updated to reflect those new changes. And so in the next slide, we see sort of what these unintended consequences happen, right? That it, that in our efforts to provide that information, that a new challenge emerged, a new roadblock to an equitable implementation of the state laws that are in place now. And you see here some examples in that across our three systems of public higher education in California, but even in the public higher education sector and the private, I should say, there was variability in the implementation. And you see some examples here in terms of how the law and the various extensions of AB 540 were not interpreted in the same way. And that ultimately led to students not being able to enter and thrive and succeed and complete higher education as intended by the law and as intended by the work that practitioners and educators have been working on for decades now. And so at the at the 20-year anniversary gathering, a catalyst emerged. And so in the next slide, you will hear more details about the catalyst that ultimately led to this convening here today.
Thank you, Will. Thank you for that overview and just sort of excitement about the expansion in AB 540 legislation and some of the unintended consequences and roadblocks that students found. So some of you might have joined us on October 2021. It was the 20-year anniversary of AB 540, where we commemorated this landmark legislation. And we celebrated all that it did, all that it opened up in terms of opening up doors to in-state tuition, helped pull forward the California DREAM Act application, entry to EOP and EOP&S programs, as well as state-based scholarships. But we also saw it as an important time to be able to do a call to action. At that time, looking at the 20 years, we wanted to just kind of take stock. What was going on with AB 540? And so Immigrants Rising took it to take a look at some of the AB 540 affidavits, FAQs, statewide, and realized that there were actually some differences, as Will was mentioning in the previous roadblocks, but kind of put that together in a little bit of a study. And we realized that called on the individual systems to try to help us see how we could build better alignment across the systems and make sure that this celebratory landmark legislation would actually realize the promise that it had. And when we looked deeper at some of those issues, we saw some of the components, like Will said, weren't from SB 68, were not reflected on various literature, that specific policies that impacted access were still unclear, uncertainty about a high school diploma or expired visa or the status somebody could have. And so this was an important moment at this 20-year anniversary celebration and call to action, that this really took off in deeper form. And what we did, at that same time, what we did looking at that was also really wanting to make sure that we had a sense of what was going on with the admissions individuals and undocumented student support personnel from CCC, CSU, and UC. So we sent out a survey to all of the individuals in these different departments from the public higher education systems, and we got a really great response. And we saw that there was a lot of resonance in terms of lack of clarity about the process, in need for better information to get students to know about the affidavit, and really agreement across the board that there needed to be better agreement across the different systems. And that's why we ended up working together to form the intersegmental work group that Will's going to talk to you about.
So on this next slide here, we'll just briefly spend some time talking to you about our process, right? So we had the catalyst at the 20-year anniversary, and from that it grew an idea about this intersegmental group. And we are, so proud of the collective work that we have done, because we hope that this is just the beginning of intersegmental collaboration and cooperation to ensure, access for all students. And so on the next slide, we'll give you just some highlights about kind of who was involved in the process, the voices that were at the table to create this important resource. And as you see here, we have members in the inter-system group that represented, all the important constituencies and systems that our students are attending or are being supported by, and in particular, as you will see on the right hand side of the slide, these was the purpose and outcomes that collectively as a group we decided we were going to focus on to resolve the discrepancies, and develop a document that would address it at the statewide level across the three systems, for the systems to then announce it, and for it to become a resource to facilitate ongoing training, right? And part of that ongoing training means also parallelly updating websites and outreach materials to reflect, the ongoing changes in legislations and policies, so that we avoid some of these discrepancies that emerged previously that we've touched on, so that we are always optimally applying the infrastructure that we created in the state of California as a national model to broaden access for our students. So in our next slide, you will see that we also had important goals that we hope establish a precedent going forward. In addition to this resource that will be used for ongoing training for new professionals entering work where they support directly the student population, but also to create the precedent of the three systems of higher education in California to work together closely and coordinate our efforts to ensure that as our students enter and exit the various systems, either as undergrads, as grads, community college to four-year institutions and beyond, and that becomes something that it's an ongoing thing rather than a one-time initiative that we do. And so on the next slide, you will see that you will now be able to hear from two of our systems leaders who were part of the group to talk about kind of sort of their input, their role, and their system, and sort of how they view the work that we've done. So we'll hear from Shawn and Linda, representing the UC Office of the President and the California Community College Office of the Chancellor. So welcome, Shawn and Linda, and then we'll turn over the floor to you both.
Thanks, William. Again, I'm Shawn Brick, Executive Director for Student Financial Support at the Office of the President, University of California Office of the President. And I wanted to really thank Immigrants Rising for doing this work. I've been in this space of California higher education for a long time, and intersegmental work is very difficult. So kudos to Immigrants Rising for navigating what can be very tricky conversations, not because we aren't all committed to serving our undocumented students, but because we have different, over time, developed different interpretations or have different enrollment pressures. And the three segments do have very different enrollment pressures. So that can influence how we view something like AB 540. But students don't need to know that, right? Students need a clear roadmap. And I think what Immigrants Rising has done has been very valuable in providing that roadmap, continuing to honor some of the differences that we still do have in how we interpret or how we implement AB 540, which you can see reflected in the FAQs, but really working hard to get us all to collaborate and produce something that I think will offer a great roadmap for our students. And also, having just been in this space for a very long time, there just really is a power to having something in writing, and it gives us something as institutions to ground our work and to reflect on and to go back to. So this is I would agree that this is in some ways a first step, a really big step, but a first step in continuing to serve our students. And we, in a way, even though I would say we are all very committed to this work, bringing us together really is a great way to help make sure that students can realize their dreams. And one of the other things that is sort of a backdrop for this, which I think underscored the importance of this work for the University of California as a system, is that we have seen a decline in recent years in the number of our undocumented AB 540 students. It's not a precipitous decline, but it is one that's happened for a few years in a row. And so I think engaging in this work is important because it really will help us turn the tide on those results and make sure that our students can get the education that they deserve. And I'll stop there and let my colleague Linda take it.
Thank you, Shawn, and thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Will and Madeline. Good morning, buenos dias. It's great to see such a strong showing of support for today's launch. Over almost 600 people on this call. I just want to share how proud we are to be a part of this effort to share the first of its kind document that is shared across systems and stakeholders. And on behalf of the California Community College Chancellor's Office, I want to thank Immigrants Rising for bringing us together and all of the partners in the work group who made this FAQ possible. I want to start my remarks by stating something pretty obvious, is that California is one of the most undocu-friendly states in the nation. That is clear, right? Since the passage of AB 540 more than 21 years ago, advocates have fought for policies to ensure that undocumented students have access to financial aid, legal services, dream resource liaisons, apprenticeships, and more. And the work will continue until they have all the rights that citizens have, or that they have in a pathway to citizenship. But we must also recognize that none of these policies fulfill their promise if they are not implemented with fidelity. Passing laws is 10% of the work. I know that I'm in government relations, so I see this day in and day out. The remaining work, and it is very hard work, is to ensure that people know about the policy, that they have the right structures in place to implement it, and many times the resources to implement the policy. And more than 18 months ago, it's hard to believe that, Nancy, that celebration was in October of 2021. As part of Immigrants Rising's webinar to celebrate the 20th anniversary of AB 540, I facilitated a panel with our Chancellor, Dr. Daisy Gonzalez, then CSU Chancellor Joe Castro, UC President Michael Drake, and AICCU President Kristen Soares. And in that conversation, we talked about the barriers that undocumented students continue to face in their pursuit of a college education. And the ending call to action was that we would participate, in a joint work group to strategize the ways that we as systems can come together to alleviate some of those structures. And again, policies can only do one thing. If those systemic structures exist, they don't fulfill their promise. And so we walked out of the conversation deeply committed to being a part of this work group and strategize the development of a joint segment FAQ. And I also want to share that since I joined the Chancellor's Office in in 2020, I have been supporting many efforts to expand college access and opportunity for undocumented students. I helped champion SB 1141, and this year we're sponsoring another bill that would continue to alleviate those barriers to accessing AB 540 eligibility. And one of the things I continue to hear is the need to ensure that undocumented liaisons are equipped with the information and resources to support their students. I know that this FAQ will support you in your role as you guide students along their educational path to a degree or career. Non-residency questions are very complex, and you'll hear from our college guests later on. And because of who you're advising, you are caretakers of that information that is highly sensitive and confidential. And this document is not intended to serve as your only point of reference. And you'll see that in the FAQ, it shouldn't be construed as legal advice because the information is highly complex, but it's meant to be a starting point for you. And I say that because our legal team was heavily involved in the process of crafting the responses. And because we know that there are consequences for students when they receive wrong information, and we don't take this lightly. And so we're proud of this end product. And again, I want to thank everyone in the work group for their patience and their contributions. Everyone who was a part of the work group knows that this was a long effort, patiently and carefully crafted. And again, just want to emphasize how proud we are of the end product. What I want to, share is that the responsibility is great. That's why this tool is very important. But again, you have a list of additional resources from all of the segments. I'll share some of the ones from the Chancellor's office and the Foundation for California Community Colleges that could supplement you in your role. One, if you don't already have, for our community college allies on the call, if you don't already have our undocumented student resource webpage bookmark on, your Chrome or your bookmarks, I highly encourage you to do so, because we put information, we put FAQs there. It's where this FAQ will live, an abundance of resources for you. You could also email ab540@ccco.edu with any questions you have about AB 540, and we have a unit dedicated to addressing those questions and can get back to you. As you are aware, California has made some significant investments in providing free immigration legal services for students and staff across all our 3 systems. And so if you already don't have this website bookmark or aren't aware of it, I highly encourage you to look into it. DACA recipients may be eligible for financial assistance to renew their filing fee. So in addition to free legal services, there is an assistance fee that supports students in paying for that cost. The Chancellor's also puts out informational handouts for you. Our team in government relations is dedicated to shaping and informing state and federal policies. We know that supporting undocumented students is a commitment 365 days out of the year. And so that's why we're attentive to the structures through state and federal policies that will support their long-term success. And I'll just stop there in saying that we know that the fight will continue, again, as I shared earlier. And if you have feedback or ideas on how we can continue streamlining support services for undocumented students, we're here to support you, and I'm more than happy to meet with you if you have additional questions. But I'll end my comments with saying that on behalf of the Community College Chancellor's Office, we're proud to be a partner with you in this effort.
Thank you very much, Shawn. Thank you very much, Linda. And I just want to pick up on 2 key points that you said before we continue sharing with you this important resource. One is, the declining enrollment, right? So, this is particularly timely because we want to make sure that we reverse that trend as soon as possible. And, this is just one of many tools, as Linda mentioned, that can help us get there, right? Can help us reverse that trend and begin to increase again across all our systems enrollment of our students. 2, I also want to pick up on, the premise of policymaking is just a small percentage of, the work that's required, right? Like this part is, a significant, these types of efforts are a significant part of what needs to be done after the law is in place. And so if we can bring back the PowerPoint, and so that we can begin to show you a preview of this resource that everyone so thoughtfully spent so much time reviewing, particularly the legal team. We were thoughtful, we'll deliver it. It was, we want to make sure that we, that when we did this, the best way possible, and that it would serve as a good example, not just for future efforts, but for other states across the country. So now I'll turn it over to Nancy, who will take us to the next section on this webinar.
Thank you so much, Will. And really, thank you to Linda and the CCC Chancellor's Office, Shawn, representing the UC Office of the President. We also want to give a shout out to all of our committee members, including the California CSU Chancellor's Office and practitioners from across the state. But here we are, the big reveal. We're so excited to be able to share this with you. And you're looking at the front page of Championing Equity, System-Wide AB 540 FAQ. And I just want to draw your attention to a couple of pieces. We'll be sharing the link super shortly, but in terms of just getting started, I wanted to make sure that you're aware of the date. We do have a date issued, as Will mentioned, and a couple of our colleagues mentioned as well. This is not a one and done document. This is something that we will continue to build. So we want to make sure that people are aware of the time, in which the AB 540 FAQ that they are looking at. And we have commitments across the systems that we will come back on an annual basis to make sure that we can do updates. If the law that Linda talks about is passed, how can we make sure that's included, as well as other agreements that are elevated, or questions that you all bring that we'll be able to look at. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is the diverse images that we have of students on the cover. Oftentimes, individuals who are AB 540 sometimes has been used as a code word for undocumented. So just looking at the diverse individuals, we want to make sure that you're realizing that AB 540 is for undocumented students as well as for citizens. It's not only the Latinx community, although there are a high predominance of Latinx students, it's also in Black undocumented students or citizens, as well as individuals who are Asian and white, so many individuals. So making sure that this is for everyone. Also, you'll see the seal of the California Community Colleges, the University of California, and Immigrants Rising. But I do want to also remind all of you that the CSU Chancellor's Office, we're continuing to work with them and their legal counsel to try to be able to get them to co-brand this as well, but they have agreed to put this on their website, their system-wide website, and include it to all of their people throughout the 23 campuses. So we're really excited and grateful for their participation. And I just did want to call attention to the fact that we are calling this the AB 540 FAQ. We're not calling it the AB 540/2000/SB68, la, 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 la. We're naming this as AB 540 all-inclusive as it is currently reflected in the educational code. So Madeline threw the link in the chat. You can also just use this QR code if you want to take a look at it. We're going to do a deeper dive, and you can just chime in along with me to take a look at that. So as we are looking at that, shout out to our Immigrants Rising communications team. They did a great job to be able to build this so beautifully. And it's the table of contents that you can see. So there's an introduction, an overview, eligibility, including immigration status, attendance requirements, degree requirements. We go on to talk about California residency for tuition purposes if someone has DACA, TPS, or a U visa. And then what's the process around meeting eligibility? Big, broader brushstrokes, differences where there are within the systems, as Shawn mentioned. It's not that everybody has the same piece, but we did want to get down on paper what the different policies are at the schools, as well as the timing and approval, the proof that's required, and then how AB 540 and financial aid interact, as well as the acknowledgement. So you might be like, oh my gosh, that's so much information. If you're actually scrolling through the document right now, you'd be like, whoa. But I think that the thing that's so useful about this is the way that it's been developed is you can actually be like, you know what? Like, what if someone has an expired visa? Boom, you can just jump right to that. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Or if you're like, you know what? Somebody went to community college classes, and then they went to their adult school classes, like, does the order in which the classes are taken matter? Boom, you get the answer right there. What about if they already had a high school diploma from another state or from another country? Or if they're like, how does that processing work? Is it the same at the CCC and the CSU and the UC? You can get those answers there. And then what about if someone's financial aid won't disperse, right? So all of these are elements that I think are really important. And we want to just show you how you can use these to actually make sure that you can navigate this FAQ effectively. So if you actually just go into the FAQ, we have this listed right now on Immigrants Rising's website, but the CCC, the CSU, and the UC will also have it on their websites. We'll send those out, and they will as well when they have them. But when you take a look at it, and you go to the AB 540 FAQ, you see that page that I talked about, but I'm just going to jump to the table of contents. And the table of contents, like I said, you can just jump back and forth between this. So if you go to the introduction and you want to talk to other people and you're like, wait, how did this all work? This talks about, what the educational code is, the call to action, who was involved. It also has a disclaimer. We have a couple of disclaimers throughout this and say, like, this is not legal advice. You shouldn't rely exclusively on this, but it is one place where we've pulled together that information for people to see. The thing that I think is really exciting about this design as well is, boom, you can just go back to the table of contents. I got that information, I'm good to go. Okay, what if you just want to know about, like, what is the actual eligibility? How do we know what's eligible? Who is eligible? Here is listed all of the criteria. As we said, all this information has been double checked, triple checked by the legal counsels. Can graduate students be eligible for AB 540? What about citizens and legal permanent residents, right? We go on to just immigration statuses here, and there's a specific disclaimer talking about there's specific educational codes regarding residency for tuition purposes, and you have to comply with system information. But if you just wanted to be like, okay, I want to look at that immigration status. What if somebody actually has a visa that's out of status, or what are the non-immigrant visas? This is not an exclusive list, but it provides you some good information about those pieces. And then who is not eligible for AB 540. So these can just be super helpful. The other part that I wanted to actually take a quick peek at, which I forgot to, what I wanted to look at before, is attendance requirements at the schools. So what are the attendance requirements, right? 3 years or the equivalent of 3 years of coursework at a California community college, a high school, an adult school, or non-credit or credit program. And then it actually, if you just scooch down a little bit, it'll actually just say, okay, how does that break down in numbers? What about adult school? What about non-credit classes? What about community college credit classes? So this is really helpful, I think, to just have one place that you can look at to try to see how do you do some of that math. And Immigrants Rising has some great tools, which Madeline will drop into the chat. If you're trying to have your students figure out where are they within that, right? We have an attendance worksheet to try to help them map that. Or the in-state tuition tool. This is just trying to provide guidance. We know that the schools are always the one that are going to determine whether someone meets eligibility for AB 540 or not, but helpful to just have some tools for students to be keeping track along the way. What about non-credit courses, right? There's lots of information in here, so we don't want to spend too much time here, but I did just want to give you a great idea about, like, what if you're talking about students are doing dual enrollment, right? Or you kind of get the idea. What about the timing and the processing of the AB 540 affidavit? And then also, what are some important benchmarks within the enrollment process? And if a student did not turn in their affidavit by that time, even though these processes can vary across systems and among schools, there are different benchmarks that students should be aware of and make sure that they're trying to meet at each of the schools that they are applying to. And then I did just want to bring some information here about the AB 540 and financial aid. Does a student need to be eligible for AB 540 to receive state-based financial aid? Can they apply for the California Dream Act before these are met? So please make sure that you take the time to bookmark this as well as one of your bookmarks on your website, so that you can, on your computer, so you can just get that information easily as you need it. So I think that this is just a quick overview. You're definitely going to want to take a look at this with more details, and then you can just take a look at the acknowledgements, the system partners, the member of the intersegmental work group, the support from the others within the system, subject matter experts, faculty, staff, educators, our communications team, but also the undocumented young people in California who have sought to build a brighter future for themselves, their families, and their communities. So that's the quick peek at what the AB 540 FAQ is. And I'm really excited now that that's some of the excitement you heard from some of the system leaders and from Will as well about why they think this AB 540 FAQ is important. But I'm really excited now that we're going to be able to hear from some fabulous intersegmental work group members about the benefits of the statewide AB 540 FAQ. And so really excited that we're going to be able to hear from Rod Santos, Dean of Enrollment Services at the Contra Costa College, Carmen Macias, who's a counselor at the Dream Resource Center at Mount Sac College and also a doctoral student at Claremont University, and Rose Carmona-Arbulú, who's chair of the Dreamer Advisory Board, as well as the student services lead of Metro College Success Program at San Francisco State University. So I'm so excited to welcome all of you here. Thank you for joining us and thank you for your work all up until today.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rod Santos, and I'm the Dean of Enrollment Services at Contra Costa College. I wanted firstly to acknowledge all of our amazing partners across the University of California, the California State University, and the California Community Colleges, along with, I've been paying attention to the webinar chat here, all of our community-based organizations, all of our adult school partners, all of our K through 12 partners, as well as some students and alumni that are out there in our state. So welcome to you all. For those of you who may know me, I've seen my name around. I've been working in the California Community Colleges for the past 4 years as the Dean of Enrollment here at Contra Costa College and our district here. And prior to that, I'd worked at the CSU and the UC. And those of you may remember me, I was the residency deputy at UC Berkeley for many years. And it's been amazing to see my colleagues, Shawn Brick and Linda and all of our friends that you'll see on page 19 of the FAQ, all the amazing partners that have been working together to put this FAQ together. In the time that I've worked in our field, I've never seen an FAQ that looks quite like this. And the fact that we can actually condense it into 18 pages is actually pretty amazing, Nancy. So a credit to all the partners for being able to put that together. But as we look at this, some of the important things that I remember starting off working in residency that was really confusing is what do we do about students and financial aid, right? So as many of you know, AB 130 and 131 passed a few years ago to allow our students who are AB 540 eligible to receive state and institutional aid. That kind of thing has not been actually queued together as a piece for students. And this will be very helpful for our students because of the financial aid and the impact that it has on our students' pockets and ability to access college. So I wanted to kind of lift up the voices of all the folks all across the state for doing this, because it truly is an amazing document that we put a lot of months and a lot of hours. I must have gone through the FAQ maybe 3 or 4 times to make it just right. And the important thing is this is a living document, because as we know, legislation just passed SB 1141, and congratulations to all of us and our students for being able to work together to help that move forward. So I would say as we move forward, some of the tips that I would say is, number one, as Nancy mentioned earlier, think about this document as an integrated approach to looking at AB 540. Don't get too confused about the different bills that have expanded the legislation. It's all one document as AB 540. The second, and probably the most important, is the grid that Nancy showed you earlier, that grid that tells you almost like the conversion between the hours at the adult schools and non-credit hours and so on and so forth. Because AB 540 is so expansive now, and thankfully it is for our students, it's become more complicated for our students to understand that. So our hope is that with this FAQ, that you'll be able to have some of those questions answered for yourselves. And for the California Community Colleges, I made a commitment to our colleagues to help go through the state and assist all of you out there who may have some questions about interpreting the FAQ and some of the new policies. So you'll be hearing more from me in the California community colleges, and I look forward to answering questions from you all down the line when I'm able to visit your campuses, either online or in person. And I will give it up to my wonderful colleagues, Rose and Carmen.
Thank you so much, Rod, and thank you so much for everyone for being in community here with us today. My name is Rose Carmona. I am the Student Services Lead for the Metro College Success Program at San Francisco State, and I'm honored to have been doing this work alongside many amazing individuals, students, staff, faculty, administrators, for close to 17 years. So it was well before the implementation of the California DREAM Act and before DACA. And I am just first and foremost amazed and want to start off with the hope that this document provides and sets the tone for. As I've started this work, as I said, many, many years ago, we always hoped, right, for the day where there would be more equal access for our undocumented students. And, you know, this work that it took, as you've heard from many of the partners on our call today, it continues, and we need all of you to continue this fight and this struggle with us. A couple of things that I'm so excited about the document is that it's going to create a comprehensive and accessible for all practitioners, right? Across all of the systems, across our community-based organizations, our high school partners. We need everyone to know about this document. It's going to provide clear steps, as we've been hearing from folks, regarding immigration status, eligibility, and the approval process. Again, it's not a legal binding document, but it's going to provide clear steps. And then last and foremost, as Nancy did mention, we have pending approval from the CSU, and we're hopeful that we can get our CSU family on board, but it will be shared across all of the 23 systems. And last but not least, I think we will continue to fight in this struggle together and keep moving on with this, with sharing this document. So thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, everyone. It is an honor to be here. My name is Carmen. I am a counselor with the DREAM program at Mount San Antonio College. I am also a doctoral student at CGU. But most importantly, I am an AB 540 student myself. Or I guess I should say I was, right? I moved on from undergrad and everything, but this work has been very significant to me because as an undocumented student in California, I was able to access community college because of this policy, right? But I went to community college 15 years ago or so on. And the reality is that the students that are entering higher education might be undocumented, but they do not have the same experience. They do not have the same timeline or cookie cutter experience that AB 540 was, right? A lot of things have changed. And this is where this FAQ comes in extremely handy because the population that we're serving now is not the population that we were serving 20 years ago. And as a counselor working directly with undocumented students, yes, I provide academic, personal career exploration, but before I can even have a conversation with them, they need to be on board, right? They need to actually have their AB 540 on file. They need to have their California DREAM Act, and they need to figure out, do I even meet the qualifications for AB 540? So as a counselor, I have those conversations very early on with my students, right? Well, tell me a little bit about high school. How long have you attended your California high school? For a lot of our students now, the reality is that they've only attended high school for 1 year or 2 years. So if we have that AB 540 definition of 3 years, we might unintentionally give misinformation and say, oh, I'm sorry, you don't qualify. But the reality is that there has been a lot of expansion within the policies to create more equitable education and expand higher education for our students. So before we give that misinformation, right? If I don't know, hey, let me check this FAQ that I heard about. It sounds really great. I'm pretty sure my answer is right there. And even as I'm attending here, right, I see all of the questions that a lot of you have. Just imagine how hard it was to condense this information, right? It might seem like a very long document, but as you are sitting here, you're asking these questions yourself. So please, please don't ever hesitate to say, hey, you know what? I don't know the answer, but let me figure it out. Because the reality is that all of us are here because we want more undocumented students or more students in general to access higher education and to graduate. So if you don't have the answer, this is a good starting place. In addition, another great benefit is that having a greater understanding of AB 540 also expands the number of students that will now become eligible to receive financial assistance through the California Dream Act, right? In order for students to receive financial aid, they need to start with AB 540. So we need to have those conversations. Last week, I met with a student who was like, hey, I have a high school diploma. Oh, awesome. I've been in California for 6 years. Cool, AB 540. And he's like, no, but my diploma is from New Jersey. I was like, oh, okay, we should have started with that conversation. But hey, luckily, we have non-credit opportunities now, right? Okay, you can still meet your eligibility by earning an associate's, or there's different things, and I'm not going to get into the technicalities of it. But the reality is that those conversations are challenging and they happened every single day when we are interacting with our students. So don't ever feel like you're doing this work alone. I love seeing over 600 participants here, right? There is somebody that might be able to support you and provide an answer. And I am always happy to be a resource to anyone, right? In terms of how can I support my students for getting them on board. As a counselor, we also support them with the transfer, right? So we love them at our campus, but we want them to go and advance and get their degrees. And when they're leaving our schools, we're also helping them with their AB 540 at the UCs, at the CSUs, right? Those conversations do not end, especially because we build great rapport and trust with our students that they are going to know, hey, I know you're not a counselor at this particular institution, but can you help me find the answer? Right? And we might not work at those spaces, but the reality is that we have to figure out how to support them so that they can have that smooth transition from one institution to the next. So I really hope that you all can see why we're so excited about this FAQ, right? I think Linda said very nicely that policy is one thing, but the reality is that implementation, it takes a whole labor of love that all of us are doing here. And by becoming more knowledgeable about these resources, we are also learning how to implement them more effectively at our campuses and or partnering organizations, how to help our students advocate for themselves. So thank you all so much for being here. Again, it is an honor, and I hope that you find this FAQ very valuable and use it in your everyday interactions with your students. So I will pass it back to Nancy and Will, so thank you.
Wow, that was just incredibly powerful to hear from each of you, from each of your perspectives, the way in which you are both going to use this AB 540 FAQ, but the need that you saw for it, and also just really talking about how this FAQ is actually going to help us envision a more equitable and successful California by increasing access for college-ready youth, extending pathways for people to meet their college attainment goals, meeting workforce development needs, increasing economic mobility, but also just making sure that more college-ready and eligible students who apply will actually be able to be enrolled. This is so powerful. We have students who are ready. We have the need for college attainment. We have students who want to, but sometimes they're just getting caught in the misunderstandings or lack of clarity on their part or on the part of the institutions. And so this is a really exciting time to help us grow enrollment, especially for older and adult students, to expand access to higher education, to make sure, as Carmen said, that a larger number of students are actually receiving their financial aid awards. And for all of you who are at the California Community College, and we know that you guys are well represented today, super important for us to be thinking about how the supplemental funding formula at the California Community Colleges provides extra funding for students who are AB 540 students. So if you are able to actually use this FAQ to increase the streamline the enrollment, then there's actually more money coming to your school as well. So this is not just something that's done because it's from the heart. It's not just something because it's done because of the law. It's actually something that's going to fiscally support your students. And for all of the systems, even without the supplemental funding formula, this is going to increase the number of students who are going to be paying tuition and who are going to be able to receive state-based financial aid and scholarships at your school. So super excited for that. Will, what would you say?
Can we go back to the
Well, yeah, we're
PowerPoint?
going to talk about some of the next steps that people can talk about, but just wondering for you if there's anything just sort of listening to those powerful practitioners.
You know, and listening to the practitioners, here's one thing that I want to say. You know, my introduction to this issue and these efforts and the commitment of educators to increase access and to really, you know, embody equity in higher education access began when I first learned about the Latisa Aid Network. And you know, and I feel like, you know, like we in many ways are carrying on the torch. At least for me, as we were all participating in this effort for the last year and a half, you know, that was sort of a North Star that said, you know, this is where, you know, educators, you know, practitioners really began to get organized to get this information out there. And the evolution, right, that has of those efforts has gone along with the expansion of the legislation. I heard it today across our three wonderful colleagues and work group colegas, basically in their own experience, sort of demonstrate that. So I just want to, you know, sort of again, thank you for sort of giving voice to this, the historical arc of this effort that will continue as we move forward.
Thank you, Will. So true. And we want to, again, just shout out to our amazing colleagues, shout out to other members of the Intersegmental work group that are on the call, as well as our system leaders. And now we just want to talk about next steps about how you can continue to champion for AB 540 equity statewide. We are 600 strong today, but we are thousands across the state. Also, I want to give a really huge shout out to the students who are on the call today and former students who actually worked to make sure that AB 540 was possible, who helped build those pathways and brought this to the attention of educators at the colleges and universities to make sure that we could address some of these issues and who are going to be really important in helping us get to that next step as well. So in terms of how can you actively implement this AB 540 FAQ on your campus, please, please, please share it with key departments, share it with student groups, your feeder schools, your partner organizations. Shout out to those CBOs, make sure that you are sharing out without your network so that everybody's aware of the power of this document and has it in their hands. Also, on the next slide, I'm going to tell you about this fabulous AB 540 FAQ toolkit that my colleague, Madeline Villanueva, who's just holding it down behind the scenes today as one of our co-chairs, use the toolkit for social media, for your listservs and more. Make sure that it's listed on your student service websites. Incorporate it into your orientations, right? Orientations are coming up for incoming freshmen as well as transfer students. And we are going to be hosting fall 2023 FAQ regional trainings throughout the state. So we'll keep you posted about those, and we hope that you can join us in person as well. I do want to give you a quick snippet of the impact you can do with this FAQ toolkit. You can use this toolkit to disseminate the FAQ across the state because it has action steps for promotion. It has social media and graphics, email templates for financial aid, for admissions, for your for all the departments that are really important that are thinking about this in place, and also sample website language. So you can access that at bit.ly/AB540-FAQ-toolkit. Use that little code, and we'll be sharing it in the recording that we send out to everybody as well. Also, just wanted to lastly say, if you want to stay engaged and make sure that you are up to date, like we're going to have your contact information, but if you have questions or you want to get other materials to support your team or share strategies, right? Our strength is in numbers. We have an FAQ interest form. So if we have a question that we didn't answer today, or we tried to answer all that we could, please hit us up at AB540 FAQ or -FAQ-interest form and make sure that you stay engaged, because as everybody has said today, this is only as strong as all of us are able to move forward. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Will to close us out. Just again, thank you so much to all of you. Thank you to our intersegmental work group members, and hooray, the FAQ is actually out in the world.
Thank you, Nancy. And just to wrap up our debut of this important resource, that we hope that you will fully utilize all of the resources and accompanying resources that we put together to disseminate and get the word out, that you will all follow through. We wanted to close by highlighting, you know, kind of additional sort of words of support from key leaders, and we were fortunate enough to get a quote here that we are sharing with you from Dr. Daisy Gonzalez, who's the interim chancellor for the California Community Colleges Chancellor System. And you know, and I want to read it to you for effect, right? California's community colleges stand by our documented students. We're proud of the partnerships to develop comprehensive multi-system FAQ on the AB 540 center issues. Our colleges and practitioners are frontline advocates for undocumented students, and timely resources on residency, financial aid, and AB 540 eligibility enables advising to help students make their educational dreams a reality. I mean, all of us, you know, you've heard today, we've been doing this, we're committed to this, and we greatly appreciate Dr. Gonzalez reinforcing and re-emphasizing that commitment, you know, from you know, her leadership position of this important system. And on the next slide, you're also going to, you know, there's a quote that that we've included from Dr. Miriam Feldblum, who is the executive director of the President's Alliance in Higher Education and Immigration. This is a national group that has been absolutely supportive of our effort, and in fact, you know, we are going to be collaborating with them on a webinar similar to this one that is going to, you know, include folks from across the country to, you know, share as an example of what other states can do to increase access to higher education for our students. And you know, Miriam talks about, you know, this crucial resource is relevant not only to California institutions, but it's a timely lesson and an outstanding example for colleges and universities across the country. Supporting undocumented student access and equity in higher education means training campus staff, partnering with community organizations, developing and amplifying clear guidance. And that's what we want to emphasize. That was one of the guiding principles that we, you know, follow in our collective work, by providing spaces for practitioners to learn from each other and engaging in active outreach with students about policies, eligibility, and opportunities. In my almost 20-year career as a college university professor, someone that I am a beneficiary of IRPA. I grew up undocumented. I never, you know, when I started exploring, you know, going to college when I was in high school, I never would have imagined that something like this would ever exist. And the evolution and the growth in California in being a national leader, and this culminated moment now of this living document is something that, you know, as a scholar, as an advocate, as a member that, yeah, as an individual that has, you know, family members and community members that, you know, continue to work on access. Yeah, I couldn't be more proud and privileged to be part of this work with our colleagues here today. We hope that you will amplify our collective effort and share it with your colleagues, continue to be engaged, and we all look forward to continuing the work together. Thank you very much for attending and coming and joining the conversation with us today. As we say in our oftentimes in our collective work, la lucha sigue, the work continues. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.